Hello and welcome again to Aldsidu. Ald meaning old, Sidu meaning customs. This channel, Aldsidu, is about the old customs or old ways. And we are going to discuss in this video that Midsummer was not a pre-Christian heathen historical bloat. Absolutely not. Now, what's the evidence that Midsummer was not a bloat or a holiday? Well, Dr. Andreas E. Zautner, in his book, The Lunar Solar Calendar of the Germanic Peoples, on page 90, states very clearly, Midsummer festivities had no connection with the olden cult. He is absolutely right. The Swedish archaeologists, scholars, and professors who have studied the archaeological and the literary evidence in the surviving literary corpus have no doubt that Midsummer is a purely Christian invention connected to St. John's birthday and the Christian obsession through the Roman obsession of solstices. I'm not saying that the Germanic peoples did not find solstices important, but their dates were all lunar. Yule was on a full moon. It was on the full moon of Jolmanuthr, meaning Yule Moon. Winter nights was on the full moon of Haustmanuthr, meaning harvest moon. Blot was also on a full moon. There are three major bloats in historical Germanic heathenry. A bloat to begin winter, winter nights, midwinter, or Yule, which is mentioned several hundred times in the sagas, 103 times in Heimskringla alone. 103 times in Heimskringla alone. And there is the bloat to end summer, Blot. So what other evidence do we have? Odin established the same law in his land that was in force in Asgard, or Asaland. On winter day, which is the first day of winter, there's a bloat for a good year, because the first day of winter is a new year. And in the middle of winter for a good crop. And the third bloat should be on summer day, a victory bloat. Blot is the word for victory bloat. So Germanic tribes had two seasons, winter and summer, and their bloats were the beginning of winter, middle of winter, and end of winter. In the interior of Trondheim, all the peoples are of pure heathen belief, though a small number have been baptized. Why? Well, baptism is the conversion rite, folks. Now, it is their old ways, their Aldsidu, their old customs, their fern sither in this passage, to hold a bloat at Haust, which is Haustmanuthr, a moon, to welcome in winter, and the second in the middle of winter, and a third to welcome in the summer. Another verse from the saga of St. Olaf, chapter 17. As long as heathendom lasted, he wanted to hold 3 bloats a year, one on winter nights, the second at midwinter, which is Yule, and the third at the start of summer. But when he became a Christian, he kept up in the same way with the feast. In autumn, he had a great bloat of friends, and in winter, he had a Yule bloat. And then he bade many men to come to him again, and the third he held at Pascha. Pascha is a Scandinavian word for Christian Passover, also known as Easter, when he also had a great crowd of guests. So St. Olaf, Christian, he did bloats at the beginning, middle, and end of winter. And Bede's calendar from the year 725 AD or CE of the Common Era, he did not mention a midsummer bloat. Not at all. And he is the earliest recorded calendar. In 725 CE, Bede recorded the calendar of the Heathen Angles, which is a Germanic tribe, which then were living in England as they gave their name to England, or Engleland, or England, land of the Angles. So again, Bede wrote down the English heathen calendar in his De Temporum Rationae in 725 AD. Bede mentioned winter full moon, and he even called winter nights winter full moon, and he even came out and said, on the full moon of that moon is the start of winter. Bede also mentioned a start of summer 6 moons after winter full moon. But Bede did not mention a midsummer ritual, and Bede also did not mention a Yule ritual. He mentioned a Mother's Night, which is a different holiday than Yule. Bede said that the time of summer was for traveling, and Bede called the 2 summer moons Letha moons. Now, the word letha is found in Old Saxon literature in northern Germany. Seolethandian is the Old Saxon word that means seafarers. And it is clear summer was not a time of ritual for Germanic peoples, but a time of travel, trade, and agriculture, getting enough food and clothing from hunting and farming to survive the upcoming cold winter. So again, I really recommend this book by Dr. Andreas E. Zautner, The Lunar Solar Calendar of the Germanic Peoples. It's a reconstruction of a bond moon calendar from ancient, medieval, and early modern sources. And these modern sources, or excuse me, medieval, the ancient, medieval, and early modern, these are all archaeological and literary sources where the overwhelming evidence shows without doubt that the Germanic calendar was lunisolar. Now, what does that mean? The word moon is related to the word month. If I add a th to the word six, I get sixth. If I add a th to the word seven, I get seventh. If I add a th to the word moon, I get month. A cycle of the moon in order, like 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. When we have moon after moon, that's what a month is. You add a th to it. So the Germanic peoples had moons to tell their time. They had days of the moon waxing or growing and waning or shrinking. So you'd have the moon growing to full moon and shrinking to the next moon. That's how the Germanic tribes told time. And they used the winter solstice, the middle of winter, to determine when they'd add a 13th moon to the year. 7 of every 19 years, they added a 13th moon to their calendar, which is why some years didn't even have a midsummer. Because when they added a 13th moon, Bede even comes out and said they added the extra moon to summer, making summer 7 months. So this is what the historical sources stated. So, again, midsummer festivities had no connection with the Odin cult. However, I said earlier, we have 103 mentions of Yule in Heimskringla alone. In just Heimskringla. We have several hundred, and I mean hundreds of mentions of Yule and winter nights. Hundreds, plural. If you were to count them, you will be shocked at how many there are. There are a lot of sagas, a lot of them. Look them up, you'll see them right. Heimskringla is huge. It's like as big as the entire Old and New Testaments combined. It's pretty big. It's quite big. Well, it's probably not quite as big as the Old Testament, but it is quite long. And there are hundreds of mentions of Yule. But how many historical mentions do we have in the entire literature of Midsummer? We have one, and only one mention of a Midsummer Blot anywhere, while we have hundreds to winter nights in Yule. However, let me read this slide. We have one and only one mention of a Midsummer Blot in the sagas. And to understand this passage, we must understand the two Christian holidays. Christ Mass, which means Christmas. Christmas means Christ Mass. It's a midnight Mass done by the Pope in the Vatican at midnight on December 25th or 24th, going into the 25th. So this was the Julian calendar solstice. December 25th was the solstice on the Julian calendar. And that was considered Christ's birth. John the Baptist's birthday, he was born first. John the Baptist was older than Jesus. And he was born on June 24th, which is the solstice on the Julian calendar. That's the summer solstice. So the Catholic Church taught that St. John the Baptist was born on the Julian calendar summer solstice. Okay? And Christ was born on the winter solstice. If these two people existed historically, which I don't think they did, I don't think any one of my listeners would believe that they actually were born on these 2 days, by the way. Interestingly enough, if Christ was born that day, the star in the sky was following. Well, the sun is far more seen in the summer than it is in the winter. So it's all odd. Well, Christianity is. But I apologize. Let's get back to the video. Dr. Andreas Zautner correctly shows and clearly shows that this one and only mention of a Midsummer Blot was done as a conversion of the people to Christianity. When we read carefully the saga passages, it shows that a king was trying to push people to adopt Christianity, and they did a bloat to St. John in the form of a midsummer bloat. And it's very clear that this is what happened in the passage. Dr. Zauntner correctly concludes in his book, The Lunar Solar Calendar of Germanic Peoples, on pages 125 through 127, that the Norwegians did a bloat to St. John on St. John's Day, and therefore this should not be taken as evidence that any Germanic peoples ever celebrated Midsummer, which later became a Scandinavian and European Christian holiday in honor of John the Baptist with the Christianization of Europe. So, Heimskringla Olaf Saga, Tryggvasoner, chapter 72, is the one and only mention of the term midsummer bloat anywhere in the sagas. Period. In summer, King Olaf gathered a great host from the east of the country and went northwards to them to Trondheim. Trondheim is in northern Norway. First, he landed at the mouth of the Nid. Then he proclaimed a thing for all the Trondheim fjord and called the assembly of the 8 districts in Frosta. However, the farmers took the invitation of the king as a call to war. They called free and unfree men from all over Trondheim. The farmers came fully armed when the king arrived at the thing. They came armed to thing. Think about that, because were weapons allowed at thing? These guys were pissed. After opening the thing, the king spoke to the people and ordered them to adopt Christianity. Jeez, he didn't even ask. You will adopt Christianity. After he had spoken for only a short while, the farmers interrupted him with shouts and ordered the king to be silent. Honestly, they probably should have told him to go have intercourse with himself and led him away. But they didn't. They threatened to attack him and drive him out of the country, which is a good response. This we also did to Hakon Ethelstan's foster son when he had the same idea of us following that Christ. And we do not value you higher than him. So they pretty much threatened to kill this guy. Then King Olaf saw the wrath of the farmers and that they had a great army, and they were armed. And he found that he could not fight them, so he calmed his words and he behaved as if he was going to yield to their will. He was lying. He said, I would like us to retain the good understanding we always had. I will go to your biggest bloat place and look at your heathen customs, foreign sither. And we will decide what custom that we will keep, and we can speak about this further. When the king spoke mildly to the farmers, they became more placid, and the debate was peaceful thereafter. It was still a debate, but it was peaceful according to this saga. Finally, it was decided that a midsummer bloat should be done at Mer. All the leaders and farmers should come as the tradition wanted, and King Olaf was to go there as well. So I side with Dr. Zauntner that the farmers converted to doing St. John's Day. And Dr. Zauntner on page 126 of his book then argues that this was one of the important milestones for making St. John's Day holy and important in Scandinavia. And I agree. It reeks of forced Christianization that is also evident in other sagas. As I mentioned before, Odin established the same law in his land that was in force in Asgard, that there's a winter day, winter night's bloat to begin winter, and it's a bloat for a good year. And in the middle of winter, or Yule, there's a bloat for a good crop. And the third bloat will be on the day that summer begins and winter ends. It will be a victory bloat because we're going to hope for victory in our summer raids. Now, it is their old ways to hold a bloat and Husmanuthr is a moon, to welcome in the winter, and a second in the middle of winter, and a third to welcome the summer. The Ynglinga saga is clear. Heimskringla Olaf saga Helga is clear. The Norse sagas state this over and over. 3 major bloats for 3 days a year. So Dr. Nordberg, in his book, Yule, on the dating of Yule, I'm not even going to attempt to butcher and offend the Swedish people here, but his book on the dating of Yule, Dr. Andreas Nordberg, not Andreas Zauntner, but Dr. Andreas Nordberg states, the pre-Christian Yule bloat or feast occurs on the first full moon The pre-Christian Yule feast occurs at the first full moon after the first new moon following the winter solstice, and the disting took place on the third full moon according to the same method of calculation. Dr. Andreas Nordberg in his book on the dating of Yule. And his evidence is based on the literary evidence and the archaeological evidence, because Runestaff, after calendar rod, after runes, calendar rod, oath rods, they all show that Yule was after the solstice. The solstice was one mark on all these rods, and Yule was a different one, and it was later. There's no arguing this. And Theodmar of Merseburg, who celebrated the birth of Jesus on the Greek Orthodox Christ Mass of January 6th, says Yule was even after January 6th. What does Theodmar of Merseburg state? In 925 CE, he states, "As I have heard odd stories concerning their ancient midwinter bloats, I will not allow this custom to be ignored. The middle of that kingdom is called Leterin, Lera. In the region of Sealand, all the people gather every 9 years in January. That's after we celebrate the birth of our Lord, and there they offer to their gods bloats." And remember, Theodmar was Greek Orthodox who celebrated his Christ Mass on January 6th. So I must state very clearly that the early church did not all agree that Jesus' birthday was on December 25th. There were sects that absolutely disagreed, like the Eastern Orthodox Church, for example. So the Greek Orthodox also had a different birthday for St. John the Baptist's birth. They were 6 months apart even on both the Eastern, Greek, and Western Latin calendars. But nonetheless, no ifs, ands, or buts, Yule was after the Greek Orthodox Christ Mass, and it was in January. And Yule was historically kept for only 3 days. We have this in Heimskringla in several spots. I can even quote the Poetic Edda, which states Yule was 3 days as well. But on the eve of Yule, King Harald came to Björngen and brought his ships to Fluravager. And there he would not fight during Yule because of its holiness. But King Magnus got ready for him in the town. He had a sling raised out on Holm, and he had chains made of iron and partly of tree stalks. He had these laid across the Vag from the king's residence. He had foot traps forged and cast over Jonsvolds. And Yule was kept holy for only 3 days when no work was done. They would not fight during Yule. It was too holy to fight, and Yule was 3 days. And of course, we have the saga of Håkon the Good, chapter 15, which records the Christianization of Yule, moving Yule from the full moon of Yule, Jolmanuthr, called Håkonot, which was on the full moon in late January, to be on December 25th, the solstice of the Julian calendar. And this is why Christmas is called Yule in Scandinavia today. King Håkon was a good Christian when he came to Norway, but as the whole country was heathen, with much heathen bloat, and as many great people, as well as the favor of the common people, were to be conciliated, he resolved to practice his Christianity in private. But he kept Sundays and the Friday fast and some token of the greatest holy days. Here's the important part. When King Håkon the Good, when his brother died, and King Håkon was in England being educated by English monks, when he came to Norway, he then made a law that the festival of Yule should begin at the same time the Christian people held it, and that every man under penalty should brew a meal of malt into ale, and therewith keep Yule holy as long as it lasted. Before him, the first night of Yule was on Håkonot, that is midwinter night, and Yule was held for 3 nights. So it is no ifs, ands, or buts that Yule was originally not in the solstice, and it was held for 3 nights, not 12. And just as the saga of Håkon the Good records Yule being moved to the Christ Mass, we naturally have to have Norwegian Christian kings pushing Christianity down to the masses to do bloats on days of Christian saints, like Midsummer, which is now the modern name for St. John's Day, but it was never a bloat day in pre-Christian heathen times. So, please visit us at www.aldsidu.com. Our blog site is at aldsidu.com/blog. Please like and subscribe. Share these videos. Thank you so much. And yes, we had 3 major holy days a year, 3 bloats for 3 days each a year. The number 9 is a holy number with bloats every 9 years. Well, until next time.